Over the last few updates, Lilith has gradually increased the amount of commanders available in the daily special offer. It has been kind of crazy. They've been adding all the commanders up until the generation of Zenobia, and even Harold Guan is in these daily bundles. There are a lot of commanders in here that really do stand out. So today, I will be discussing the best value for all players from these bundles. I will start off with those really early game players who may be a bit of a low spender and they want to get the most value when they get to the end game. I will talk about these small low spenders in the end game, and then I'll talk about the big whales in the end game who just kind of want the commanders who will give them a lot of instant value but may not last as long. So if you are interested in buying this bundle, then you should definitely check out this video before you start purchasing any other commanders. Now we're going to start off with the early game, and in the early game, there are a few commanders at your disposal, and there are a few big standouts. So I'm going to say early game is up until KVK 2, which is when most of these commanders come out. So in the early game, if I'm not mistaken, you will have access to Tomyris, Constantine, Saladin, Edward Woodstock, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, El Cid, Frederick I. You won't actually have access to Thutmose until Season 3 for whatever reason. Ragnar, Charles Martel, Richard, Julius Caesar, Sundar, Cleopatra, Ishida, Mehmed, Mulan, Cao Cao. You won't have access to Cyrus. I don't know why he's at the end of the list. And YSG. So overall, here are the do not buys, just pretty much no matter what. Unless you're a mega whale, do not buy Constantine in KVK 2 or 3 whenever he drops. I think it is KVK 2. So Constantine, don't buy him. I wouldn't really be buying Edward Woodstock or Genghis Khan. And Genghis Khan's a mega whale, and so is Edward Woodstock. They're the best KVK 2 rallies, but they're kind of trash after that, so I wouldn't really be buying them. Same thing with Genghis Khan. He's the best KVK 2 rally with Saladin, but he's garbage after that. Like, you're going to get him for, like, what, maybe half a KVK if you can somehow expertise him during the time frame. But other than that, he's not going to be that useful. El Cid, I wouldn't be purchasing. Frederick only in KVK 1. He's okay in KVK 1, but after that, do not buy him. Thutmose, I wouldn't be purchasing in KVK 3. Same thing with Ragnar, I wouldn't be purchasing him. I would probably I actually definitely would not buy any of these gathering commanders at all. I wouldn't buy them ever. They're not worth it in any situation for any players. I wouldn't be buying Cao Cao. And then also for most normal players, unless you're a big whale, I wouldn't be buying Mulan. So now here are the commanders you should maybe consider buying. First of all, we've got Saladin, and he is the cavalry option for most players. If you plan to run a cav march in Season 3, then Saladin is actually a pretty good option for you. You purchase Saladin, you try and expertise him possibly from the daily bundles, you maybe put some golders into him, which I think is fairly reasonable if you are spending enough money to buy the daily bundle consistently. And you'll be able to basically cement yourself as having a fairly good cav march when you reach Season 3, which is when you access all the Season of Conquest commanders. Then Alexander the Great, another commander you could consider. He is the infantry option. So if you want to run infantry in Season of Conquest, you get Alexander the Great. Very good commander Season 2, and he's still fairly useful in Season 3 and Season of Conquest. Definitely worth it if you are purchasing this bundle. If you are running any infantry, like you want to run a lot of infantry marches, Charles Martel is another option, though he is available in the gold chest, but I thought I'd mention that. Richard is a very, very good KVK 1 commander, like very, very good. That's why I'd also mention this. If you are running a very, very powerful KVK 1 murder ball, Richard is a commander you definitely want in that. Julius Caesar actually holds a lot of value with his relic, so if you want to maybe fill in a slot with a commander who you know you won't have the secondary for, Julius Caesar is an option. Preferably put him with a commander who doesn't have much march speed and doesn't have too much all damage. So he's really good with commanders like XY because they don't have a lot of all damage, but they got high rage cycles and they've got a bit of march speed, but they're not too fast. Caesar really does amplify those types of commanders. Also, Mehmed is another commander. He's different to Julius Caesar, where you'd put him behind any commander that really needs a secondary. Boudica Prime, Scipio, Nevsky, all these commanders can have a Mehmed behind them. Just ensure that if you're buying Mehmed and Julius Caesar, you know you're going to get the double relic before you do anything. Otherwise, they're not going to be that good on the open field. I also think I'd give another highlight to Mulan just because she is really, really good for Wales. If you're going to Season of Conquest, Mulan is your option if you're doing a 6-march murder ball because she is probably the best buffing commander. And then anyone that's planning to do archers in Season 3 and beyond, you're going to be running an Esong with someone, so Esong is the best option for you. Now, in Season of Conquest, you have access to a lot more legendary commanders, just like in general. You have access to a ton more legendaries, not only in just your normal commanders, but also in the daily special offer themselves. So we'll start off with commanders you just should not get at all. First of all, Zenobia, definitely do not get her. I probably would not be getting YSS or Theodora either. They're both fairly outdated garrisons for the most part, Zenobia being the only one you can still somewhat use. YSS with Heraclius is okay, but for most players, you have to get a Heraclius, and if you're buying the daily bundle for YSS, I presume you're not getting a Heraclius. Theodora is only an average city garrison at best, I wouldn't be getting her. I also don't think Leonidas is really worth it, but he does have some uses, which I'll explain for the whales. And then that's pretty much all they've added. They also do have a Cyrus, and Cyrus isn't off my list at the moment. For the most part, you wouldn't get Constantine or really any of these Season 2/1 commanders, just because they aren't too useful for you. Alexander the Great and Esong being the main exceptions there, and maybe Saladin. And then you could also still consider the Julius Caesar and the Mehmed for the same reasons I mentioned before. So those commanders are the only ones you could consider if you are just entering Season of Conquest and possibly you don't really want to buy any of these commanders, or you're close to finishing some of these other commanders. They are still an option. And if you are still, like, let's say, trying to expertise Mehmed or Caesar or even Mulan, they are very good options still because they amplify all your other commanders drastically, and their double relics are very, very good. Now, for free-to-play low spenders, here are the commanders that are fairly good for you. First of all, you have Harold Sigurdsson, and he is quite strong. We know he's got a lot of counterattack. He's great for city popping. He's great in the field because if he does get hit, especially if you've expertised him, you know that his skill is going to hit back on the opponents and it's going to bite real hard. So if they do hit your Harold, you're going to be in a fairly good situation. Then William is another commander which you can consider. He is the best Cav commander available on this whole list, in my opinion. He is up there with some of the best currently. I'd put him probably at rank 3 or 4 for the top Cav commanders in the whole entire game. So if you are a Cav main, William's almost a must get, and I would just consider just straight up buying him. Over any other Cav commanders here, I would get him. I'd get him over Chandragupta, I'd get him over Attila and Takeda. So William is definitely a very, very good commander. Chandragupta is very unique. If you're running upwards of 3 Cav marches, he's a must-have. He provides a lot of debuffs. His active skill also is giving you a ton of all damage increase, and he's putting this debuff called Blessed on the opponent, which basically makes them take, I'm pretty sure it's a reduction in march speed, and I think a defense reduction and health reduction. So it's a really, really powerful debuff, and it's in a passive skill slot for the most part. So this means that it's going to stack with any commander. So Chandragupta is actually a fairly good commander. He's also got a fair amount of damage factor as well, depending on how many stacks of Blessed you can get on the opponents before you remove them. So you can see Chandragupta is going to be doing a ton of damage factor and removing lots of debuffs. So he's a very, very strong commander, and I think a very overlooked commander. If you're a Cav main and you're running even 2 marches, there's a chance you could consider him, depending on how big your other motables are. Maybe you've got a lot of infantry marches, maybe you've got a lot of archer marches, maybe you just want his debuffs to help your team. He's actually a fairly good option, though I think William is definitely a better purchase on most low spenders. Then for archer mains, you have Artemisia, and do I really have to say much about her? She's quite a powerful commander for the most part. She's got a lot of damage factor on her active skill, so that's one thing that's very nice. She's also got a lot of health and defense. Her third skill is a garrison skill. She's not really a good garrison anymore, but she's got a lot of all damage when you put her with a Boudica, and she's got another nice amount of damage factor on her expertise. So Artemisia is probably the best value for archers. She is going to pair really well with your Boudica, so if you don't want to run a Boudica Zulang, or your Zulang is elsewhere, like with a Henry, for example, just like how I run my Zulang, then Artemisia is a very, very good option to put with your Boudica. If you're not running a Boudica though, she's probably the second best option, because if you're not running a Boudica, then you're going to buy that Cyrus. I presume you would already have an Esong maxed if you are an archer main. So Cyrus is definitely the best option for you if you don't have a Boudica Prime. He's giving you a ton of debuffs. I've already gone on and on about Cyrus in many other videos. I'm just saying though, he's got a ton of march speed. He's like a very all-round commander, and he works quite well with a lot of different commanders. So if you are an archer main and you're looking for a current best commander to purchase, then Cyrus is your best one if you don't have a Boudica Prime, or your Boudica Prime is with Zulang. And Artemisia is your best one if you're willing to split the Boudica Prime and the Zulang and just run her by herself. As for Ramses, if you're a new player to Season 3 or Season of Conquest and you need a second or third archer march for whatever reason, he's a commander you would go for. He's not too bad of a primary nowadays. Yes, he's nowhere near as good as he used to be, but a Ramses is still going to hold his value on the field, especially if you're not using too many gold hits on him. He's just from the daily bundle. If you're willing to spend the money, then he is a good option. And for most players, Ramses is going to perform quite well if you do gear him up right and put him with some new, stronger commanders. Now, Leonidas, I said, is basically a whale-only commander, and I still stand by that. Leonidas used to be the best pair with Guan because he has an amazing shield. His shield was basically at its max bonus when you just unlocked him, so back in the day, a 5-1-1-1 Leonidas used to be field usable. Like, it would be a not too amazing field march, but a usable field march. Scipio Prime and Sargon and Tarek and all these commanders came out, and all the new archers came out, and they just completely outpowered Leonidas here. So for the most part, Leonidas isn't an option you can really choose anymore, though he is okay for whales who just get to Season 3 and need a commander to put with their Guan. Instead of getting a Harold, possibly you can just get a Leonidas, and it's going to do well, though it's not going to do that amazing. You're never going to see a great trade with him. Like, you'll never see a 1 to 10 trade with a Guan Leo nowadays, but you will probably still see a few 1 to 2, 1 to 3 trades when you get lucky. But if you get hit by any Archer marches, this march is going down real quick. Guan Yu, on the other hand, is the best value for infantry players currently. Everyone knows Guan Yu. Everyone knows he is a powerful commander. So Guan Yu is going to be one of your best options. If you are being an infantry main and you want to be able to use some very powerful commanders, Guan Yu is the best option for you. He's got extreme damage factor. He's got a massive silence. He's got a fair amount of march speed and attack. And granted, the healing factor is okay if you're just smashing dead flags. And he's got even more damage factor. And if you have him expertise, he benefits from Leonidas' shield, Scipio's shield, Alex's shield. He benefits from a lot of shielding. So Guan Yu, for all low spending infantry mains, he is your best option. And he's probably the best commander here, I would say personally. Maybe he's on par with Artemisia and Boudica, but for the most part, I'd say Guan is probably the best commander available in this whole entire bundle. So even if you're not an infantry main, maybe you just don't really care, you're trying to run a even mix, Guan is probably your best option overall. Then you've got Attila and Takeda, and for real big cav mains, these commanders are really good, especially Attila. He's usable with Nevsky, he's usable with Joan. I've seen Attila Jones do okay. Usable with XY, so Attila's usable with a lot of commanders. And the thing with Attila is he's the best city popping commander for cavs, because he's basically immune to swarming. If your Attila gets swarmed down, you're not going to expect too bad of a trade, because he's just got counterattack on counterattack on counterattack on counterattack. That being said, he's more of a Wales commander though, because if you don't have the stats to really back up his counterattack, so let's say you don't have high crystal tech or you don't have high equipment, then your Attila is going to get wrecked by someone who's got fairly decent stats. I know Attila was actually one of my top priority targets this KVK, because a lot of people didn't have the equipment when they were running Attila, and they didn't have the crystal tech, and they didn't have any of these things that really gave Attila his big boost in that extreme damage. So I could just attack the Attila, drop a skill cycle, and run away, and I'd get a good trade. So if you got a really good Attila, maybe you got really good cav equipment, and you're going to go fairly hard on crystal tech, Attila is a really good option. But if you're not, Attila is more of a Wales commander, and I would recommend steering away from him or building your account in some way to be a more optimized account for an Attila, though I don't think it's worth it since he isn't that amazing of a commander. He will always trade at least 1-for-1 though if you have the right equipment and technology, and you've set your account up to be a fairly good Attila account. As for Takeda, he is the best pair in my opinion for Attila besides Nevsky, but Nevsky has better pairs himself. So Takeda is definitely a good option if you are going to run the Attila Takeda, but once again for most players he's a whale commander. He's basically just putting a debuff on the opponent that's making him take more normal attack, which, you know, makes sense because he's just trying to deal as much normal attack as he can. So his debuff is important, but if you are running an Attila and a Takeda, you could always just run a Ragnar if you have an expertise and double relic Ragnar. So keep that in mind. Your Ragnar's actually closer to expertise than your Takeda by a fair margin. He basically performs the same if you're willing to purchase his double relic, and that is definitely something you should keep in mind since relics are a lot more expensive nowadays. So just as a recap, the best cav commander for any cav mains currently is William. The best archer commander is Artemisia if you have Boudica Prime with no secondary, or it is the Cyrus if you're missing a secondary to almost any commander. YSG is also an option, but he's also available pre-season of Conquest, so you could just purchase him then. For infantry players, Guan Yu is the best option, though if you are not fast by your troop types, Guan Yu is the best value in the whole entire bundle by far. If you are purchasing this just to make your account as strong as it can be, you don't care about the troop type, then Guan is your option. If you have a max Guan though, then I'd probably go for one of the archer commanders or one of the cav commanders. Probably William. I think he's better than Artemisia and also better than Cyrus, but then again, you have to do whatever your account has. So if you got better archer equipment, you go for the archer commanders. If you got better cav equipment, you go for the cav commanders. And then Attila and Takeda are your best whale pair. So if you're a whale and you've just reached season 3 and you're going to pretty much max crystal tech, buy as much equipment as you can, Attila and Takeda is going to shred on the field for you. If not, he's probably a skip commander. Also a commander I forgot to mention, Tomyris, if you're a whale, is really good. She's got an amazing debuff. I'm sure you've heard of her debuff. It's basically on par with one of the best debuffs in the game, if not the best debuff in the game. And she is kind of being rivaled by Sargon the Great. And if you want to know a little bit more about Tomyris or Sargon, I will have a card linked on the end screen of today's video, which will take you to the video where I talk about Tomyris and I talk about Sargon. I actually compare both of the commanders. So if you want to invest in either of them, I do highly recommend checking out this video. I give you all the facts I have on both commanders. Now, I do want to say I thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next one.